What up? Okay. Yeah. Welcome to Hopeful Resistance. This is my midweek madness specials that I want to start doing. I realize that maybe once a week is not enough to hit on the absolute insanity that we are currently experiencing between the shutdown and the insane speeches given yesterday by Secretary of War Pete Hegseth and the president. So I want to talk about that. Definitely want to talk about that. That's probably going to be the bulk of the show. Most of you have probably heard me, at least in some cases, mention I was in the Marines for 10 years. I was a sergeant when I got out. I served with both VMA 211 and VMFAT 501 between Harriers and F-35s. While I was with Harriers at VMA 211, I deployed once to the 31st MEU, which is kind of a party det usually. Like, it's a pretty good time. But while I was on that MEU, this tsunami had hit Japan. I think that was back in 2009. And while I was in Afghanistan, I was with VMA 211 and our base. We were stationed. We were stationed in Kandahar, and then we were also stationed in Camp Bastion, which was attacked by Taliban militants. They blew up like 6 of our jets. I think blew up 6, disabled 8, and they killed our commanding officer. So it was absolutely insane being out there. So I do have a lot of love for the military. I have a lot of love for this country. I think that sometimes people hop in here and are maybe confused about where my loyalties lie. And my loyalties lie like basically 100% to the Constitution and the United States of America. I'm not, I know that there's mixed feelings on how the U.S. has behaved over the years, but my loyalty, I'm actually willing to acknowledge those things. I just want to make sure that it's wholly clear that I have an absolute loyalty to this country and I love this country. So before we begin, one of the things that I actually wanted to do, I thought about this all day while I was at work today, is I want to read the enlisted oath out to everyone, because I think there's a lot of people that don't understand what veterans and service members are talking about whenever they say, oh yeah, remember your oaths. So I want to make sure that if you haven't gone to look it up, I'll just read it out to you. Okay, so the enlisted oath. I swore this oath. I have one of my kids. They actually just finished Army basic training. They're doing what's called split ops, which is where they went to their junior year, and then over their junior summer, they went to Army BCT. Graduated. We went and got them at the end of the summer, and right now they are currently finishing their senior year before they go off to their AIT. I don't ever want there to be any confusion about how much I love the U.S. Okay, I'm just not a fan of the administration, and we're gonna get into why. But before all that, the oath of enlistment. Okay, so the oath of enlistment would be I, and then you would say your name. Do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed over me according to the regulations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Okay, and then if you're religious and you want to say it, you could say, "So help me God." I think it's worth pointing out, okay, because I think a lot of people get lost on what it is that the oath actually is to, okay? The structure and order of the oath is specific in the way that it is that you first basically swear loyalty to support and defend the Constitution before you swear loyalty to obey orders from the president and the officers appointed over you. I think that it's often lost in translation because the president is the executive and is in control of the military. Who is it that the military serves? The oath was by design meant to prevent the military from being used to basically oppose tyranny on the citizenry. It's also why we have like laws in place to prevent I talked about this in another episode, to prevent the military from being used as law enforcement. Now, let's get into a couple things before I deep dive down, before we go and like watch the Hegseth speech, before we go and look at what Trump said, before we do any of that. I want to talk about specifically what has the military been doing so far. So far, the military has not been doing law enforcement. The military has been used as a political tool by the administration to basically intimidate, to impose fear, but they have not been performing law enforcement duties. There was some speculation. I know that Hegseth had to go before the oversight committee and basically like say, it was asked, did you give the orders for them to do it? And he wouldn't answer the question. Again, I don't like Hegseth at all. I'm going to talk about his qualifications. I'm going to talk about what kind of, based on everything that I've read about him, what kind of soldier I think Hegseth was outside of his ranks and stuff. Before that, though, I think it's worth just pointing out that so far, all the military has been doing is logistics. They have just been assisting the disgusting ICE agents in their effort to basically impose tyranny on immigrants in this country. We could talk about my feelings between illegal immigrants, what I often refer to as migrants, like legal migrants, and then of course what I guess would refer to even further as naturalized citizens. If you're not aware of like the breakdown of those things, I encourage you to go and do your own research. Don't just take it from me, but they are all three drastically different categories of people that weren't born here, but are allowed to be in some cases allowed to be here, completely allowed to be here. And so, we can get into that another time. Actually, I think we've talked about it in previous episodes, so it's not just, exclusive down the middle. So let's talk about Secretary Hegseth. Okay, so Secretary Hegseth, for those that may not be fully aware, he actually has he actually did a lot of split service. I wasn't entirely sure. They said, oh, Hegseth was in the military for 20 years. And as far as I can tell, that's not accurate. It seems his years of service were broken up. He was in from 2003 to 2006, and then he was in from 2010 to 2014, and then he was in from 2019 to 2021. So there's big splits on where it is that he's served, which is not uncommon in my understanding to National Guard service members. Furthermore, he, we talk like pretty out there about like, okay, he was a major. He was his award. He was never above the platoon level. Actually, one of the interesting observations I had when I watched the speech, which I'm going to talk about. But one of the interesting observations I had whenever I watched the speech was, to me, it's not higher leadership. I've been listening to General Mattis's book, and General Mattis basically gives his whole breakdown. Okay, if you're not aware, the book is Call Sign Chaos. He wrote it in 2019. He thankfully left out a great deal of his opinions about what he was doing as Secretary of Defense, but not all. One of the things that I really liked about the book is at the end of it, he does talk about his opinions on what are the greatest threats to the United States today. And I think that there's a lot of it gets overlooked quite a bit about, did Mattis support the president whenever he was performing his duties as Secretary of Defense? And the short answer, that as I understand it, is he supported the office and wanted to be a good SecDef. He did not support President Trump's agenda, what he wanted for the United States, what he wanted for our allies. And so as such, he resigned because he felt that if that's what the president wanted, then the president needed to hire a Secretary of Defense that was on board with it. Based on current observations, that seems to be what Trump found in Hegseth. So again, Hegseth was a major whenever he got out. For those that aren't familiar with that rank, it's an 04. So any new officer that comes in, they come in as a second lieutenant. After second lieutenant, it's first lieutenant. After first lieutenant, it's captain. And after captain, it's major. He was never higher than a platoon commander, which in the Army, as I understand it, platoons are anywhere between 40 to 60. I guess they can be up to 100 people in a single platoon. Once you get past the platoon level, you get into the company level. Company, by comparison, I was in the Marines. Companies, by comparison, can be up to 4 to 5 platoons. So you go from being in charge of, say, 40 to 100 men, to being in charge of 500, 400 to 500. The difference between the command structure at the platoon level versus the command structure at the company level is night and day. And Mattis talks about that in his book as well. Again, you should go read Mattis's book. It's fantastic. I love it because he breaks down the mindset that he had from whenever he was a young lieutenant to when he was a captain to when he was a major, a lieutenant colonel, a colonel, all the way up until he was a 4-star general and in charge of CENTCOM. And even after that, the limited time he spent as a Secretary of Defense. My opinion, of course, is that by comparison, Hegseth is grossly unqualified, like not at all qualified. And based on the speech, I feel like that's just reinforced. So we're going to talk about things I agree with, things that I don't agree with. I'm going to pull up the video here real shortly. So I don't think there's anything else I really want to hit on just before we start there. I want to get into this video. I want to talk about the things that I think he is right on. My experience in the Marines was wartime experience. And whenever the Marines are in wartime, the standards are held very tightly. So I cannot empathize with Hegseth's opinion. My understanding is that he feels like he was treated unfairly because of his extremism. Based on everything that I've read, he was treated exactly how he should have been treated. The military is not a political entity. They're not designed to be a political entity. It is supposed to be apolitical. This idea that he can go in and that he can impose his insane white Christian nationalist ideas into our military is not okay. So let's jump over here. Give me 1 sec. I'm going to switch us over. And we're going to take a look at the speech. There's bits and parts of this speech. We don't necessarily have to go through the whole thing. And I want to point out one thing. If you haven't watched this, we're not going to watch all of it. I'm going to be skipping around because there's parts and segments that I feel like are really important. I earlier today had found a video that had like very nice chaptered out sections. This one doesn't. So we're probably going to be using the transcript here and there to kind of jump to parts that I want to focus on. I think that it's just, in my mind, it's just really important to point out where I don't disagree with the Secretary of Defense and the parts where I wholly disagree with him, and why those parts showcase that he is not capable of leadership higher than the platoon level.
Please take your seats.
Oh, one other thing before I go like really, really far. It's something that I think is really freaking insane is that he brought in generals from all over the world and sat them down in a room. That is the first and foremost part of the whole thing that, to me, clearly demonstrates his mindset has not stepped beyond the platoon level. That is something that a platoon commander would do. He would have all his men come in, and he would sit them all down, and he would give them this kind of talk. Once you get past that level, once you enter into the company level, then you don't do this as often. It's not that you don't do it, you just don't do it as often. And then the higher and higher and higher that you get in rank, you realize that the value of bringing all of the people that are under you into a room and sitting them down and talking to them basically breaks down into limited or zero value, because now you're taking away from the warfighter. It's interesting because he spends a great part of this speech, screaming about how he loves the warfighter and how he's looking out for the warfighter, and how warrior ethos and but like it's so ridiculous to me that he makes these claims about how he wants that to be his focus. Then at the same time, literally inhibits that effort by bringing all of the top brass in just to sit them down like they're a bunch of E4s and E5s. It's insanity. We're gonna run this a little fast. He talks really slow and it's annoying. So I hope you can follow along because I'm gonna be cranking up the speed.
Mr. Chairman, the Joint Chiefs, Generals, Admirals, Commanders, Officers, Senior Enlisted, NCOs, Enlisted, and every member of our American military. Good morning. Good morning. And welcome to the War Department.
Oh, where'd it go?
Because the era of the Department of Defense is over. You see, the motto of my first platoon was those who long for peace must prepare for war. This is, of course, not a new idea. This crowd knows that. The origin dates to the 4th century Rome and has been repeated ever since, including by our first commander-in-chief.
If it's too fast, you can let me know. I'll try to slow it down.
It captures a simple yet profound truth. To ensure peace, we must prepare for war. From this moment forward, the only mission of the newly restored Department of War is this: warfighting, preparing for war and preparing to win, unrelenting and uncompromising in that pursuit. Not because we want war, no one here wants war, but it's because we love peace. We love peace for our fellow citizens. They deserve peace, and they rightfully expect us to deliver it. Our number one job, of course, is to be strong so that we can prevent war in the first place. The president talks about it all the time. It's called peace through strength. And as history teaches us, the only people who actually deserve peace...
It's such a ridiculous notion, peace through strength.
Pacifism is so naive and dangerous. It ignores human nature and it ignores human history. Either you protect your people and your sovereignty, or you will be subservient to something or someone. It's a truth as old as time. And since waging war is so costly in blood and treasure, we owe our republic a military that will win any war we choose, or any war that's thrust upon us. Should our enemies choose foolishly to challenge us, they will be crushed by the violence, precision, and ferocity of the War Department. In other words, to our enemies, F-A-F-O.
That's so
if necessary, our troops can
childish and
another way to put it
like
is,
it's just a ridiculous notion, right?
brought to you by the War.
I want to skip around because again, I've watched. So I encourage you to go and watch all of this. Okay, I want to talk about a couple things. One, don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to enhance the lethality of the armed forces. It is by design meant to be the tool in which we go and enact war on our enemies. I feel like the Secretary of Defense fails to understand by definition what war is. Okay. War is the tool. It is the instrument that you use whenever you want to impose your political will on your enemies, and they are not willing to accept that by other means. I think that by renaming it the Department of War, it's always Hegseth, like the president, is obsessed with optics. He's obsessed with he's obsessed with looks. That's why he had the makeup makeup room installed for him in the Pentagon. It's why he is so hyper focused on his appearance, because he was a Fox News host, because he was a platoon commander. He doesn't have any sight. He doesn't have any vision for the higher level of which his post demands of him. He is completely obsessed with appearance. Okay, that doesn't always translate well to lethality. Okay, at the lower unit level, it absolutely would. Right, you want to hold your lower command, right? The lower units and the lower parts of your command to the enforced lethal standards. Okay, the Marines do this all the time. No matter what rank you are, no matter how high you get in the Marines, you are always required and expected to pass and complete a PFT and to pass and complete a CFT every year. Okay, what you do, the PFT basically every 12 months and a CFT every 12 months, and it equates to you doing some kind of physical fitness test every 6 months. Okay, that doesn't change in the Marines. That's why in the Marines, you're in the gym constantly. You're constantly in there exercising, maintaining standards, etc. Now, I worked on planes, and I heard it all the time when I worked on planes. Well, I don't have time for that, okay? Yeah, you know what? It's hard. When I was working 16-hour shifts, it sucked to work a 16-hour night shift, get off of work, and then go to the gym. But I'd go for 30 minutes sometimes just to get on the treadmill, run for 30 minutes, and then bounce out and go home. I started picking up some of those like 25-minute circuit trains that you can do. We still like to pick those up. I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to enforce military standards within the military. And I also don't disagree with Secretary Hegseth whenever he talks about wanting to enforce general standards across the board, albeit not the way that he says it. I think it's unfair because men and women are different physically. It's unfair to expect a peak physical fitness female to be able to meet the standards of a peak physically fit male. And that's why I think having two different standards wasn't necessarily a detriment to the military, as long as those standards were the peak standards for the sex of the individual. So I think it's insane to me that he wants to make one standard across the board. And that's why I don't necessarily think people are wrong whenever they're talking about how they want to push, how he is trying to push females out of military service, that he doesn't want them in there. Because if you set the standard to a purely male standard, there are females, you're basically not going to have any females, because it requires a peak physically fit male to meet that standard. So it's absolutely insane. The other thing that the Secretary of Defense talks about is he talks about how he wants to basically allow drill, I guess they're called drill sergeants in the Army, drill instructors in the Marines, that he wants to allow them to put hands-on recruits. Like, they're called trainees in the Army, they're called recruits in the Marines. That he wants to allow them to put hands on them. I'm sorry, guys. They've been putting hands on. They've been putting hands on. I don't like this concept is basically going to enable some batshit crazy drill instructor to shove a recruit in a dryer like they did back in I think it was in San Diego back in like 2006 and lead to the death of recruits. And there's a reason why these safety standards were put in place and why they found ways to basically continue to instill fear into recruits and trainees. This idea that they have to be able to literally hit recruits in order to instill the fear in them is not true. And anyone that I would argue that anyone that needs that in order to instill the fear that we would want our recruits and trainees to experience, the only way that they can do that is by hitting them, is someone that's just not fucking intimidating. It's not scary. I was more scared of my drill instructors, and not because they were able to hit me, okay, but because they just were terrifying people. They were just good at being scary. It wasn't the fear of them hitting me. It was the intimidation of authority. They held authority over me, and that's where real true like loyalty, respect, fear, that's where that fear is driven from. Okay, and enabling enabling drill instructors or drill sergeants to actually become physical with recruits is just going to lead to the death and harm to trainees and recruits, which is not something that we would want. Okay. So just to recap, I agree that we should be maintaining physical standards across the board, albeit they should be split by gender or at least by sex. I think that we should be trying to be constantly maintaining a lethal warfighting force because there are warfighters. And I don't disagree that we should be constantly pushing to maintain that standard. Okay, I disagree that we should be allowing drill sergeants and drill instructors to hit people. That's insane. Okay, the physical abuse will just lead to injury. It will lead to death. It has in the past. That's why we don't have those things anymore. That's why they're gone, because it was the military recognized this is not how we're going to accomplish the things that we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to make a strong warfighting force, and if we allow drill instructors or drill sergeants or whatever to beat the shit out of recruits, we're winding up with either injured or dead recruits, and that's not what we want. Okay. There were some other things. Let's see. I want to because again, you should really go watch it. Oh, he talked about how we're going to remove ROE. If you don't know what ROE is rules of engagement. Okay. He said, oh, we're going to get rid of stupid rules of engagement. That on its own is not, I would say by itself is not something that is like super concerning, right? Rules of engagement are tough to designate, okay? Mattis talks about it in his book, how he was really big on setting his commander's intent and making sure that everybody understood that, especially on the initial invasion of Iraq, that we want to avoid civilian killings because we're not trying to make martyrs. We're not trying to drive people against us. We want to win hearts and minds. Mattis talks about it all the time. So he was really big on commander's intent, on like spreading it out to the rest of the units. That way they fully understood what it was that he was trying, what it was that he wanted accomplished. And so that is something that I feel like is basically lost in what Hegseth is trying to talk about whenever he says get rid of the ROE. That getting rid of the ROE is not what we should be doing. Okay, we should be maintaining a strong ROE that enables our warfighters to kill people without putting too much risk upon them to do it. I think it's worth noting, though, that we're not at war with anybody. Okay, why do we need to change rules of engagement whenever we're not actively engaged in anything? It's concerning because right after Hegseth talks about it, the president comes out and basically says that we're going to be using United States cities to train our warfighters. So it's concerning to say we're getting rid of the ROE, and then in the next sentence saying things like, "Oh yeah, we're also going to be trying. It's an enemy within. We're going to be using the cities as training grounds for the warfighter." Like it is basically setting the stage for an idea that we're going to unleash the military to the civilian populace, which is not something that we should allow. Okay, it's against the Constitution. It breaks the enlisted oath. It certainly breaks the officer oath, which is the same thing, right? I will support and defend the Constitution. Anything that they're not saying it outright necessarily, but anything that they're implying is heavily laced with the kind of language that they're going to send the military into civilian populations, which is not something they should do. It would be disgusting and terrible. So it's worth keeping those things in mind, that by itself, wanting to change the ROE is not bad outright. Wanting to change the ROE while simultaneously talking about sending the military into cities to attack and to basically fight the enemy within is concerning language, to say the least. And it's something that I think all of us should be deeply concerned about. So, again, I've got this whole transcript pulled up, and I want to, like I said, I don't disagree with everything that the SecDef said. I disagree with his mindset. I think it's a platoon commander's mindset. I disagree with the messaging that he's trying to get across, on a whole, because again, we could say, oh, we were like this before World War II. Yeah, great. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be trying to continue to maintain that standard. I think it's worth noting that the way that we maintain that standard doesn't necessarily mean that we have to be ready to break ROE, or that we have to be ready to send the fucking troops into cities like the president suggested. So just some things to keep in mind, especially if anybody that comes watching. If you're a veteran, we have the oath. Our oath is to the Constitution, and some of the things that they're implying they want to do is a violation of the Constitution. It's not something that we should be ready to jump on and support. So the other thing that I feel like Hegseth gets really, really hung up on is this woke idea. So I was looking into it. If you're not familiar with Hegseth's work, he wrote a book that was called, where's his book? That was called The War on Warriors Behind the Betrayal of Men Who Keep Us Free. So he talks about this in the book, and he talks about this in a Fox News interview, and he talked about this in a bunch of other places, about how he was supposed to be one of the people that was gone on a detail for whenever President Biden's inauguration, and how his unit commander came to him and said, hey, you're not coming with us. You're not going. You're like, stand down. And how he was like, what are you talking about? Everybody's going. And they were like, no, you're going to stay here. And the reason why was because someone else in his unit felt that he was an insider threat. And the reason they felt that he was an insider threat is because he has Deuce Vault tattooed on his arm. That's not a made up picture. That's not an AI generated thing. He actually has that tattoo on him. And I would say that it wasn't just the tattoo. I would say that it's also probably a lot of the way that he talks and the way that he behaves, because it's very, very obvious that Hegseth is like a hardcore Christian nationalist. And with that, I could understand why some people in his unit might not feel like they could trust him. Just like I would understand if there was somebody in his unit that had the sickle and hammer tattooed on them somewhere, and was like, oh yeah, I support Karl Marx. I wouldn't want that guy coming with me either. So I think it's unrealistic that Hegseth tries to act like the military is woke and out to get him, and that's why he seems so hellbent on basically destroying it, because he feels like it screwed him over. And that's not what really happened. He's just a piece of shit, and they didn't want to have to go into a situation where lives could be on the line, and then they didn't feel like they could depend on him. Which, frankly, that's fair. If you don't feel like you can go into war with someone next to you, then don't fucking go into war with them. If you don't feel like you can go on a detail where things could potentially, even though it's incredibly unlikely, but where things could potentially lead to some kind of life-endangering situation, and you can't trust the men on the left and right of you for whatever reason, whether it's their political ideology or religious ideology or whatever, if you don't feel like you can depend on them, it's fair to say something. I don't feel like I can depend on this guy. And so if that's what it comes down to, then guess what? That's fair. And he's just butthurt. And to me, that's why he's so hell-bent on this warrior ethos. He's so hell-bent on this warrior mindset because he wants to be a warrior, but he's not really one. Okay? So, going back to some other things, I do want to branch off and talk about some of the more amusing sides of this situation, okay? Also, I mean, I was going to pull up all of this, but really, you should just go watch it, okay? Don't take my word for it. Go and watch the entirety of it. I think it's crazy whenever I'm scrolling down social media, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or Blue Sky or Threads. I think it's insane to me whenever I scroll down some of these feeds, and it's kind of obvious that people have only seen clips. You should watch the whole thing in its entirety because that's why I say there are things that I agree with. There are parts of it that I think are okay, and there are parts of it where I'm like, dude, you are fucking crazy. You are absolutely batshit insane, and you are clearly hellbent on delivering on you're clearly trying to politicize the military, and that's not how the military is supposed to function. It's supposed to be an apolitical entity. And he tries to say at the end, we're gonna let you go back to being a non-political. After he just basically sits down and has a rally speech. Like, why was this televised? If we're going to talk about how we don't want this to be political, then why the fuck was it televised? Because they are trying to make it political. Because he's a liar. Okay? They are trying to make it political. They are trying to instill fear in people that they view as the enemy. And as the president says, right after he's done talking to them, the president talks about who's the enemy. Well, the enemy is within. So let's not sit here and pretend that it's anything else other than that. Also, you should go watch it because watching the president ramble on about stuff that is just like, bro, what? Like, you can kind of like see whenever he snaps back, it's wild. I just can't get into it. It's so much. It's just so much to unpack. And I'm only trying to be on an hour tonight because this is new. We don't normally do middle of the week stuff. But this is absolutely fucking crazy. And I again, highly encourage it. I'm going to try and make sure that the link winds up in the description. In fact, I'm going to go throw it in there right now. You should go watch it. You should 100% go watch it because it's fucking crazy. I'm going to drop it in here. So, speech. Okay. Yeah, go check it out because I'm not, it's... You got to watch the whole thing, okay? It's long. It's 2 hours. If you're really, really invested, if you really give a shit about what's happening and what the Secretary of War and the President of the United States are saying, you should watch this whole thing. Don't just watch the little clips that I've pulled up. Don't just watch the things that we're talking about. You should go watch the whole damn thing because it's full of shit that is concerning. Shit that makes sense in some instances, but mostly shit that's concerning. And that we should all be concerned about. Okay. I want to say, yeah, you want to talk about Hegseth being okay. It's in here somewhere. I know it's in here. Oh man, there we go. Oh no, wait. It's funny. Hang on. It's gonna see how it like shows up on the left here. So I probably could have had some of this clipped out, and I do have notes that kind of pull up a lot of what he talks about. So again, Hegseth's talking about he talks about the lethality, which is important. It's just whenever he starts talking about ROE that's concerning. When he starts talking about how we should go back to how we should basically bring back hazing, how we should bring back, putting hands on recruits, how we should bring back everything else. And one other thing that I think is really interesting is the way that he tries to you can tell that some other people have said this before, that he's trying to have his General Patton moment. I think there's a quote from the president of him kind of saying the same thing that was like, oh yeah, they said he was great, that it was like his Patton moment, but they said my speech was better. Like, okay, dog. Like they're so concerned with optics, they're so concerned with the way things look that they're not like that to me takes away a great deal of what it is they're trying to impress here. So I did finally pull up that quote from Mattis. So the quote that General Mattis had was, Donald Trump is the first president in my lifetime who does not try to unite the American people, does not even pretend to try. Instead, he tries to divide us. We can unite without him, drawing on the strengths inherent to our civil society. It will not be easy, but we owe it to our fellow citizens, the past generations that bled to defend our promise, and to our children. We must reflect and hold accountable those in office who would make a mockery of our Constitution. And I want to read that quote, especially to my fellow veterans. We got to remember our oath, and we got to remember that we might disagree politically, but we agree on the idea of America. And that's something that the president doesn't believe in. The president believes in himself. It's not something that the Secretary of Defense believes in. The Secretary of Defense only really cares about himself. They don't care about this country, and they pretend to, and they use your love. They're taking advantage of your love and your interest in protecting the nation to manipulate you into supporting them, because that's what they care about. All right, we're gonna break away now. Got a little bit of time. I want to break away now, and I want to talk about some of the hilarious stuff that's come out of this. At least things that I think is hilarious. Okay, I do use Reddit, and I gotta say, for my fellow Marines, some of this shit is fucking hilarious. Okay, and if you come on here, it makes me chuckle super hard whenever you see shit that's like, looks like hazing's back on the menu, boys. Like, or this one was really good.
Kids are soft.
Hang on, let me make sure. Okay, good.
Your kids are soft. You lack discipline. But I've got news for you. You are mine now. You belong to me. You're not gonna have your mommies run behind you anymore and wipe your little douches. Oh no, it's time now to turn this mush into muscles. No more complaining, no more Mr. Kimball have to go to the bathroom, nothing. There is no bathroom.
Yeah, like I said, some of this shit is pretty funny. And some of it is built up on the same levels of concern for my fellow veterans. You get this. There's like, it says 114, 115, 116, 119. And then Hegseth says, yeah, fucking right, start over. And then they all go, oh, because they all have to count out it. They'll have to count out again. That would be fucking hilarious. Oh, this was actually something else. I'm glad that I saw this. Because he talks about, he talks about, I mentioned he talked about women in the military. He also talked about beards. Yo, if you're not familiar with the skis or the pagan, Nordic pagans, it is within their religious right to wear beards. And both of those societies are heavily emphasize, or they heavily emphasize war fighting, being warriors. Why the fuck would we not want that in our military? And have you ever seen these special forces guys? I've seen them. Okay, I've met and talked to a lot of them, both in and out of theater. The motherfuckers don't shave because they're not focused on this ridiculous appearance standard that the Secretary of Defense is obsessed with. And he's obsessed with it because, again, he's not a Secretary of, he's not qualified to be the Secretary of Defense. He's a fucking platoon commander who's been put in charge of the entire military. Okay? I don't give, if you were a Navy SEAL in theater, I don't give a fuck if you have a beard. I want to make sure that you can operate efficiently and with lethality. All those things that I said that I agreed with. But this grooming standard bullshit is nonsensical. It's nonsensical bullshit. Exactly that. It's nothing. It's a nothing burger. It's the Secretary of Defense being a platoon commander because, of course, he's obsessed with optics. Okay, this is another one that made me laugh really hard. Sergeant Major Ruiz. They turned him into. If you're not familiar with who that is, that's Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, and they turned him into a baby, and it made me laugh my ass off because the guy's a hard charger. Okay. What else? Yeah, I mean, some of this shit. Again, it makes me feel a little more inspired that a lot of my fellow Marines are mostly not on board. They mostly are like making jokes about it, right? Just like shooting the shit. And it makes me laugh really hard. Okay. Again, same thing on the military. You can see there's probably a lot more criticism here because, as far as I know, most of the people on the military subreddit are not, are not either current or prior military, or they're not United States military. So, yeah, it's a little different. Their mindsets are a little different. The way they engage with these things is a little different. By and whole, though, there is just like there's not a lot of love for the Secretary of Defense and the way things went yesterday. Okay. The other thing I want to point out, because I feel like maybe you've seen it. The president talks about war a lot. And we could say, honestly, I don't even know why the fuck the president's here. To me, it's crazy that we have the president, we have the Secretary of Defense, we have all the Joint Chiefs of Staff, we have all the higher command, all consolidated to Quantico. The security risk here is fucking insane to me. And as far as I'm concerned, the only reason that fucking Orange Cheeto showed up is because he heard that there was a party with all the generals and the Secretary of Defense and was like, well, why wasn't I invited? And so that's why he's out here fucking standing on this podium, yabbing on about God knows what. Okay, you really should go watch it. But one of the things that he says, this right here, okay?
Only in recent decades did politicians somehow come to believe that our job is to police the far reaches of Kenya and Somalia, while America is under invasion from within. We're under invasion from within. No different than a foreign enemy, but more difficult in many ways because they don't wear uniforms. At least when they're wearing a uniform, you can take them out. These people don't have uniforms. But we are under invasion from within. We're stopping it very quickly.
He's full of shit. Okay? I want to make sure it's very clearly noted. Okay? I can even play it. I'm not going to play it again. I'm just going to read it off to you, okay? He says, only in recent decades did politicians somehow come to believe that our job is to police the far reaches of Kenya and Somalia, while America is under invasion from within. We're under invasion from within, no different than a foreign enemy, but more difficult in many ways because they don't wear uniforms. At least when they're wearing a uniform, you can take them out. These people don't have uniforms, but we are under invasion from within. And he says we're stopping it very quickly. First off, in the recent war in Iraq and Afghanistan, they didn't wear uniforms, so he's fucking retarded. Because of course, Mr. Bone Spurs has never served the military in his life, has no concept of what it's like over there, or what the enemy that we're fighting is like. Okay. Second off, because he was, as far as I can tell, probably hoping for some kind of cheering or applause or something. He was hoping that the military would be fully on board. I think both him and Hegseth were thinking that this was going to be like another one of his insane rallies. And it didn't turn out to be that, okay? It turned out to be a complete and utter nonsensical shit show for them. And it made them look unhinged as fuck, okay? I've seen more active service military and veterans kind of flip sides and be like, what the fuck are y'all talking about? And then again, the looks on some of these higher command's face, some of them, I imagine, are just pissed off because they got pulled from wherever they were performing their duties, which for some of them is super far. It's like way across the water. Now they have to come in here and listen to these guys yap on about fucking nonsense because neither one of them it has any understanding of what military life is like, of what serving this country demands, or any real concept of the oath that they took. Okay, Hegseth, as far as I'm concerned, with a lot of his behaviors and a lot of the things that he suggested, is very close to being an oath breaker. Okay, the president, he's basically already violated his oath of office. So this entire thing is complete bullshit and nonsense, and it's really frustrating to watch. Okay, but I do love the looks on some of these guys' faces because you can tell that they're just like, okay, like maybe a sergeant or a corporal would be if they had to show up to one of these and they like, this is an absolute bullshit. Like, this is a waste of my time. I was in theater and I had to come to this fucking formation because Platoon Commander Hegseth is a fucking retard and made me come out here and sit in this bullshit briefing and yap on about some shit that is irrelevant and doesn't matter. And that's probably one other thing that I want to hit on. He has them sit in here and for an hour yaps on about lethality, okay, which again, like I said, I don't disagree that they need to be lethal. I don't disagree that we need to maintain physical standards. I think grooming standards is a waste of time and should be upheld again, at the platoon level, which Hegseth is a platoon commander, so it makes sense that he would obsess about that, okay? It makes me think about in Generation Kill, whenever they're the mustache competition, and the Sergeant Major comes down, and he's like, police that mustache! That's what I feel like Hegseth is up here, yapping on about beards and nonsense. Is he's worried, is he's all about the grooming standard. Like, you're the Secretary of Defense. Why the fuck are you worried about the grooming standard, you fucking idiot? You should be more worried about the bigger picture of things, and you're bringing in all of the top commanders of our country to yap to them about grooming standards. You're a fucking joke. Okay? But that's actually the perfect example. I'm going to use that forever now. Police that mustache. That's what I'm going to, he's Hegseth, police that mustache. Okay? So, what was the next thing? I you know, as always, I diverged off into my rants and rambles. But I was talking about this, okay? The president using this kind of language, they wanted this to be some kind of rally for them. And it's not. It wasn't, okay? A lot of these top commanders, they already understand what is demanded of them. They didn't need Hegseth to try and give them a pep talk. I think they brought them in to try and get an idea of how much military support do they actually have. And I applaud our commanders for not, basically, if they agree with him, that is their personal right, as long as their agreement doesn't impose on their duties. Okay? They swore oaths to the Constitution, not to the president, not to the Secretary of Defense, to the Constitution. You follow the orders of the president after you support and defend the Constitution. Okay? Period. That's why the oath is given in the order in which it's given. That's why those two parts of the oath are split in two. So it's just worth noting. So it's worth noting how important it is that they didn't sit there, that it didn't turn into some crazy rally. Because I'm sure that some of them might agree with him. I'm also sure that some of them might have changed their mind after this. And I'm even more sure that even the ones that do agree at least didn't go crazy expressing that agreement, because they understand that this is not the time or place to do it. Right? They're in uniform. And I imagine that if, for any reason, the president and the Secretary of Defense were under some impression that they would have the backing of the top military leaders in the country, that idea to them is completely gone. Now, I think it's going to be important over the next couple of months, especially as we start to come even closer and closer to these midterms, that we pay attention to what they're doing, because they already overturned a lot of the Joint Chiefs of Staff were overturned. Although, as I understand, there's a lot of headbutting with the Joint Chiefs of Staff and Hegseth. But they overturned a lot of the people because they were too woke. Okay, so something to keep in mind. Okay. All right, we got about 10 minutes left. Normally, when we get close to the end of the show, I talk about action items. Okay. I know that there were some action items that came out the other side, like there usually are. So whenever we talk about action items, we're talking about ways that you can get involved, that you can do something. One of the things that I think is really worth noting is that, first and foremost, before you do anything else, you should know that what you can do is you can get involved locally. Okay? You can get involved in your local elections. You can even go even smaller, and you could start getting involved with your, start getting more involved with your neighbors, finding ways to beautify your community. All kinds of these things, they do help uplift the spirits of those around you. And I've said this before, something that I agree with Charlie Kirk on. One of the two things that I agree with the man on was nobody cares about each other anymore. The way that we generate care for one another, okay, the way that we can do that is by being involved with one another, right? Sitting down and getting back to the point where we interact with our neighbors. It's a great way to build relationships with people, okay? So first and foremost, if you can, find ways to get involved locally, whether it's with your local elections, whether it's with your local your local political parties, whether it's with your neighbors, whether it's with like a soup kitchen or some other kind of charity that you can support. Anything that you can do to be involved in your local community is going to make the world a better place, and that's really something that you should be trying to do. Okay. So, one of the things that I feel like we need to be paying attention to, okay, is sorry, I'm reading some of the notes Mom put out, and I don't know that we're necessarily at this yet, but I think one of these is really good. Orders in writing, okay? If a memo appears to be directing troops toward domestic law enforcement roles, you should not be doing that, okay? You should, and again, I'll say this, for a lot of you like standard veterans, you're not higher military, not going to be one of those things that you're necessarily going to see come across your desk, okay? Something like that is something that's going to be handled at a higher command level, and we have to put the trust that higher command knows what is and isn't okay, which is why we've only seen them used as logistics support, because that is within the confines of what the military can do. Okay, there's probably going to be the legal battles. I know Mom mentions these legal battles. I think it's worth noting that a lot of the legal battles are going to be used with the UCMJ. That's the Uniform Code of Military Justice. They're going to be behind closed doors, because a lot of that is behind closed doors, where we're talking about the court martials or NJPs that come from people disobeying orders. Some of them are going to be stupid. Okay, you can't just disobey orders. You have to be able to very clearly demonstrate how the orders that you're disobeying do violate the Constitution. If the order is to shoot into a crowd of civilians, yeah, that's a pretty clear, cut and dry violation of the Constitution. Don't fucking do it. If the order is that you have to go to Los Angeles and stand post at a federal building, that is a lawful order that you have to follow. And pushing back and saying that you don't want to do it because you disagree with the president is not a good reason. Okay? People aren't going to agree with that, but frankly, that's how it works. Okay? There's military resistance. Watch how senior officers frame their role publicly. Even small pushback statements will matter. This is something that is awesome. Whenever I went to the graduation for my kid, their commanding officer speech reinforced that idea that loyalty is to the Constitution and not to the president and not to the Secretary of Defense, that all loyalty and oaths are promised to the Constitution. Okay. And don't dismiss, I like this one. Don't dismiss renaming and rhetoric as just talk. Okay. Authoritarians often normalize ideas symbolically before they act. So that's why the president trying to stand up there and say, it's an enemy within, it's no different than a foreign enemy, is absolutely batshit insane. It's not normal, and we should not normalize it. It's not fucking normal, and it's not okay. We need to get that across. People always just, oh, that's just, no, fuck that. It's not just Trump. It's not fucking okay, and we should not be okaying it. Okay, we need to go back to the point where we realize that everything that's happening isn't fucking normal, and we shouldn't be okaying it. We should be like, what the fuck? And we should be doing the next part of action items, okay? So the very next thing that you can do, I talk about this all the time, there is an app that you can get on your phone that is called 5 Calls. The 5 Calls app, just so we're clear, this is an unpaid advertisement for this app. The 5 Calls app is an app that you can use to call your representatives, okay? And it gives you great tools in order to, call and talk to them. And it even gives you phone numbers to call them. So this one is like, for example, for my representative, it shows his number, and the one that I put down was in Trump's dictator rule. It's basically just trying to be like, I'll even try to read this out for you, where it just says, "Hi, my name is blank, and I'm a constituent from your city. I'm calling to express my outrage over the Trump administration's ongoing abuses of power and Trump's dictatorial rule. I ask that my representative." For the record, it says like my name and where I live, and then it has my rep's name, but I'm not going to tell you guys that because I'm not going to dox myself. Nice try. Okay, no. It says, I'm asking that he refuse to pass any blank check federal spending bill that enables authoritarian governments' unconstitutional practices, that he stops letting the president usurp Congress's constitutional authorities like spending, tariffs, and military, that the 5 articles of impeachment, that they can sit. I think we're certainly at the point of impeachment, but I think the GOP and the Republicans are too cowardly to do it. But I would say that if you've got your representatives like I do, that's a Republican, that you should call them, and you should probably use words like cowardly. You should be like, hey, stop being a cowardly fuck and stand up to the president of the United States, please. Okay, and don't even say please, because fuck them. Okay, you voted for them, they're your representative. They should be saying please to you, not the other way around. Okay. And that they should pledge to investigate and prosecute any government official that has participated in this administration's illegal action. Something important to note: if you do call, you whenever you're leaving, if you call from 7 at night to 7 in the morning. If you call them, you can leave a voicemail. If you decide to leave a voicemail, you have to give your full name and address. And the 5 Calls app does tell you that you have to leave your full street address. So bear in mind, you can call, and you don't always have to talk to somebody. You can call and leave a voicemail. And as long as you put your full name and address, they will have to record it. That's why calls are better than emails, okay? If you don't want to call, that's okay. There are other alternatives to what you can do, okay? So one of the things that we talk about, I'm going to switch back over here to let's see. We should check out over here is we should check out the card campaign. This is a really neat one. So what you can do is you can print out these cards, and they give very detailed and informative. I know that I've seen some people suggest that like you leave them for a waiter or waitress. Don't do that. Okay, they're just going to throw it away. It's not going to get through to anybody. I would say that the best places are places where people sit and wait. Okay, your doctor's offices, you're getting your brakes done, you're at the mechanics. Okay, these you're sitting in a waiting room for any number of reasons. You can just leave one of these cards behind whenever you go, because then somebody might come along. They're going to be sitting there anyway, and it's going to give them an opportunity to read it. Definitely, probably the best use of them. Okay. The next thing that I think you could always check out would be the 5051. So if you have the time, want, inclination to get out, get super involved, and protest, 5051 and Indivisible are both your key way to get involved in a very real and physical manner. Okay, these websites both break down where, when, and how you can go and protest and be involved physically. Okay. The other thing that you can do that I would encourage a lot of people to do is that the midterms are coming up. Whenever we get close to elections, the local offices for your political, your political entities, they're going to start canvassing. They're going to start trying to get more voters. That's something that you can volunteer to do. Okay. I imagine that because the Republican side of things is pretty fucking cowardly right now, and that they just cow to whatever the president wants, that what you could do instead is go and check out your Democratic office. Go and maybe even go as far as checking out like your Libertarian offices if you're really against the Democrats. I think it's a waste of time to go to like your Libertarian office or your Green Party, but they're political parties too, and there's no reason why you can't try to get the word out on them. I just think that they're both too split on policy across candidates that it's tough to know if it's going to be a good choice for you. But that's another option that you have. So yeah, that's pretty much the gist of my show today. I have been really, really pissed off about that speech, and I've been feeling a lot more reassured watching some other veterans and some other active service members kind of come out and give their opinion. And I like that it's a mixed bag of opinions. I do think it's super interesting that all of the veteran influencers out there, that all of them are like full hard-on for the Secretary of Defense, which is crazy to me. But it makes sense because a lot of them have, like most influencers, a lot of them are cowed by their community, and they know that they could lose followers, or they could lose, like, they're basically letting their own personal gains and their own political opinions basically cloud their judgment on whether or not they should honor their oaths or not. I personally think that makes them little bitches, and I hope that if anybody watching maybe happens to follow one of them, you can gladly send me telling them I think the little bitches to them, and it doesn't bother me at all. I'm Aaron the Quill. They can reach out to me anytime. I think that if you're a service member and you watched the speeches yesterday and then you got all excited about it, I think that you're a coward and a bitch. And if that hurts your feelings, I don't care. So anyways, thank you everyone for joining me. My midweek madness. It's probably going to be a lot of rambling. Mom made some really, really good notes. I do appreciate the notes. I didn't use them because I had very strong feelings tonight, especially whenever it comes to what the president and the Secretary of Defense are doing to the armed forces. things will, as far as it's my opinion, this is my last thought. My final opinion, my ultimate opinion is as long as elections continue, we're going to be just fine. Right? If elections continue, I'll even go as far as to say that Ben Shapiro was right and the guardrails held. They're dented as fuck, and they're on their last leg, and we probably need to rebuild them, but they held. And democracy and the Constitution and the United States is not done. It's definitely not where it was 10 years ago or 12 years ago, or I guess I can't even say 10 years ago now because 10 years ago was a shit show. It's not where it was 15 years ago, but they held, and we're still intact. It was a rough go, but we're still here. So I will catch y'all next time. Thank you so much for joining me. I will see you all on Sunday.